I have to begin to saying that I'm his best friend. And he has been my confidant all the time. And I know too much about Henri Saux in order to speak perhaps confidentially about him. He came to India, and as he said, I came to India to let Hindus know you. And finally the Hindus converted me. And that was a painful experience, because he was a Breton, a real Breton, from a Breton family. And he came to India just because he was not beginning, well, I'm perhaps putting in my interpretation also. He did not feel completely at home in his Abbey. And on the other hand, he was completely Benedictine up to the bones, and convinced, and sincere. His greatness was his great sincerity. To describe a personality, and a personality like that of Henri Saux, is not an easy thing. Especially when one knows him a little too much, which is my handicap. When he came, he joined Shyness, because Shyness had an ashram in South India, in Tamil Nadu. Well, at the beginning, he was not sure to join him. He wanted to explore, but in the Abbey, they wanted to be more or less canonically rooted. And he did it. He met Shyness, and a couple of weeks after, I don't remember the dates exactly. Don't trust any Indian about dates. We are not historically minded. When I came to meet him, to meet Shyness, especially Shyness, because at that time Shyness was more known than Henri Saux. And we went to 3 speaking, and I still remember Henri Saux went after a few hours of talking with Shyness, went to bed, and he and I spent the whole night speaking about the Trinity. Shyness was another personality, whom also I knew well. And I was, in a certain way, I suggested the name that we created, the Shantivanam de l'Esprit, in which I was the 3rd member, although not canonically, because I shun these canonical things. I'm a free spirit, and I think I'm still a free spirit. But immediately we connected, because we could speak French, and he spoke with certain difficulty. He could not pronounce too well, even French. But finally I came to understand him very well. Well, I was speaking about him, not about me. Although we met several times. He came to see me to Varanasi, where I was living. He lived with me several weeks. The place he made when he was making a jump now to the Himalayas, he bought it because I was Indian citizen. He bought it in my name. So I was the official proprietor of that little kutiyar, as we called it, in which he was living, and I visited him several times. As a matter of fact, my book on the Trinity, I wrote it in his house, in his kutiyar, in Uttarkashi. Until the end of his life, he was, I don't know if that's the word, a tortured soul. Jeu de fidélité. I have two loves. I have two commitments. One is Christ. The other one is the Indian spirituality, which has no name, which has caught my heart completely. Arunachala was the symbol. When he lived and we pilgrimages together, and we celebrate the Mass in Arunachala several times with him. But he did not find peace until the end of his life. Until his realization in Indian words. When he came to India, in his unconscious life, he had discovered that something was lacking in the West. That something was too superficial in the West. That Drakano, which the symbiosis between the genius of the Roman Empire and the Greek, the Hebrew world, ontologized right. And right cannot be ontologized. And he was feeling uncomfortable. He was looking for something else. And he spoke with his Abbey, and his abbot told him, okay, let's go to India and we will see. You only need some place where we know each other. And we know where you are. And the pilgrimage, the internal pilgrimage of Henri Saux, about which, and that is his greatness, he was not completely conscious. He was all the time so out of himself, so unselfish, that he could not look inside and discover this interiority in him. He was trying to discover this interiority in the others and in the symbols of his life, which were Christ and slowly the Indian spirituality. At that time, we cannot forget that even in the Catholic milieu, a long way has been performed, even before Vatican II. The others were considered not only heretics, but immoral, not even up to the human being in a certain sense. We cannot forget, and I am glad to be able to say it, that is a great saint, undoubtedly, a tremendous mystic, no doubt, like Saint Bernard, goes up to saying what today sounds like a blasphemy, that in the crusade, who kills a Muslim, I quote, non est homicida, sed malicida, does not kill a person, but kills evil. And that heritage slowly has been changed, but in that church of Bretagne, the Benedictines, the internal spirit, the sincerity of Henri Saux let him felt that could not be the total thing of that Christ whom he had consecrated his life. And until the end of his life, until when he got, I said it, the realization, enlightenment, and when he fell sick in Uttarkashi, just running after a bus. He felt, and fortunately, he found a person who knew him, and that's why we could take care of him, and he came to the south to be take care of. until the end of his life, he could not synchronize. He could not agree, and he felt a sense of infidelity to his vows. But on the other hand, he felt that he could not help being loyal to himself. And that, I think, is the real greatness of Henri le Saux. A greatness about which he was totally innocent. Slowly is a long way. He spent in the cave 30 days, I think, in South India, because that was also in the Benedictine tradition, that he could make a retreat in silence and meditation, and slowly, but very slowly, our discussions, but he was just looking at me saying, well, you have no problem, you are an Indian, but I'm not, and I have to react, and I cannot agree with you, with what you say. For you, it's not a problem. For me, it is a problem. But that's his greatness. That's the problem which he felt and about which he was sincere up to the very end. And at the very end, he discovered that was not a betrayal of his Christian vocation, but was on the contrary, a summit. But then, because he was such a sincere person, that had, today we say, a psychosomatic reaction. He burst. And his cœur attack, his heart attack, was mainly psychosomatic, than not just, he was in good health still, due to the pressure of his double loyalty. Well, once you get to the core of a person, you get it, and you love it, and you discover that all the rest is this blah 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 of Motionangs. He was saying, oh, this blah 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 of the intellectuals, which is not my cup of tea. His cup of tea was much more his heart. But that was his greatness and what made him suffer. And I repeat, he did not find his total peace until the end of his life. And he was all the time, I said at the beginning, tortured, which is perhaps not the best way to say it. He was tiraillé, as he would say in French, by the two loyalties. Anecdotes about his life, extraordinary, many. I had a bad memory for anecdotes, but nevertheless, I can remember very well the weeks he spent together, the pilgrimages we made, his... well, I don't know, it's very interesting of his background. We did pilgrimage, and it was hot, and we took a bath in, I think it was the Ganges or one of the rivers of the Ganges. It was very hot. I, in the most natural way, took off my clothes and went into the sea or into the river. I felt that just one, as the Germans say, Fingerspitzengefühl, just making that he was not comfortable as with me when I went there. And then I took a small little bath, and then he also took a bath without his clothes. He still felt the uncomfortable aspect that somebody would be looking at him and he was naked. When he put his tubinam, his loincloth, was for him also a sense of witnessing. I don't like, I feel uncomfortable, but if my brethren, Hindu brethren, took that when he took sannyas, I have to take it also. And he put it at the beginning, not just the beginning, in a very uncomfortable way. Later, obviously, it was more natural, and he did it, and he had no qualms whatsoever. But that, I think, is a portrait of his soul. Sensitive, very sensible to very many things, not wanting to push himself away. But that's my way, and you like it or not. That was not his way. He was always, I don't say dependent, but aware of the existence of the other. And that's why, until our meeting, with whom he could feel really at home, and the meeting with Marc Chadouk, who was also a Frenchman, he felt, I don't need now to play any game. I can be myself. With Montchanin, he had to put on his mask of theologian. And they could speak theologian, and Montchanin was a saint also. But who can tell us what is the style of a saint? Each saint is different. Each saint is one style. On the contrary, I'm saying to look between a lukewarm Methodist and a lukewarm Catholic is more similarity than two real persons who are committed to their own particular traditions. And I think that he's alive. He's not dead. And the proof is that still, after so many years of his passing away, he is still remembered, and his message will maintain and will perdure. And his message is much more important than he himself thought. He contributed to this breaking of these barriers between religions. And he incarnated in his person this kind of, I don't like to call it synthesis, symbiosis, agreement, harmony, that to be a good Hindu does not amount to being a bad Christian. That he could be a real Benedictine, although making little fun of so many of these ritual things of the Benedictines, but he could be also a Hindu. But this is a painful and especially a long process. Another anecdote of Abhishiktananda, which expresses the delicacy of his feelings. He was still the only survivor of the ashram where they were living in Shantivanam. Slowly, Bid Griffiths, whom also is known, and who was also a good friend of mine, who I could speak two languages. Another anecdote at the beginning, when Bid Griffiths came to India, an Oxford man, I had to translate his English from Oxford English into Babu English, and people couldn't understand because at the beginning they saw Bill Griffiths was totally ununderstood in his way of life. When he came to take over above the ashram, Abhishiktananda had to be present in order to hand it over. He felt so bad that he hid himself for 3 days so that nobody knew where he was. He could not stomach. He could not hand it over with a clear conscience and a clear mind. He thought that it was the time that he had to leave it, and he wanted to have to leave to Turkashi and had all those permissions to live there. But he could not feel the pain that what was until his life, his 30 years or I don't know how many years, in Shantivanam, he could pass it over to others. And everybody was looking, where is Abhishikta? Where is Pekaleso? Nobody knew where he was. He was hidden himself in a nearby place until the whole thing was over, that he emerged again. So the place is also in the Indian way. You have a guru. You want to follow a guru. And the guru tells you, and that's in many traditions, wait for 12 years. After 12 years, you come back. So in India, we don't believe in acceleration. Great speed. Now you can win 20 minutes reaching Lyon earlier. And what are you going to do with the rest of your time? Or as the Africans will say, you have to watch. We have time. And if one goes with time, we want to accelerate. And the natural rhythms of this deep conversion took place in him during a long process, a painful process. He could not discard away saying, well, I'm free. No. Another anecdote which describes, and I don't think he has written that, the sensitivity of his feelings. I'm speaking about 40 years ago. He had permission to say private mass. But in that mass, during that mass, you had an antimensium. You had to put the relics of a saint, and then you celebrate the Eucharist. Not that I have celebrated this morning without anything. The antimensium, as it was called, broke. That day, he did not dare to say Mass. He preferred not to say Mass in which he believed, etc., than to break a norm of the late canon law, which says that an antimensium is needed for saying the Roman Catholic Mass. He did not say Mass that day. Afterwards, he discovered that Mass is more important than this little ritual. To discover that the Sabbath is meant for men and not meant for the Sabbath, you cannot do it overnight. I'm so smart that no. And that, I think, is his greatness. He took years to mature. It was a painful effort at being loyal to himself. But he would not say to himself, loyal to Christ and loyal to the Hindu symbols of the divine. And now his message is slowly passing. Nobody will think today that the other religions are works of the devil. But that has costed people like Abhishiktananda, who lived it at the very end, who lived in his life, in his flesh. And I repeat, I think that is his main message, to liberate one tradition from the shackles of that particular tradition, which, or one of those, I think I told him, and he was, I don't remember the dates, and I don't remember if I told him just, but with other words, because we were on the same trip. For me, was just as a philosopher, or as a thinker, in a more existential way. My father was a Hindu, I have been in the Hindu tradition, and I have not abjurated from my Hindu tradition. I am too much of a philosopher, thus I say, I cannot say that I am a Hindu and non-Hindu. But I can say that I am a Hindu and a Catholic. Who has told us that the Hindu is a non-Catholic? The principal contradiction is respected, but it's another way. But I have to speak about Abhishikta, about Henri Saux. He was ébloui, as he would say, dazzled by Ramana. And he wanted to imitate him. But at that time, he was too much, in the Indian way, attached to Jesus. We speak of detachment, asakta, detachment. And Ramana remained for him all the time a light, a model. But I would dare say that he did not play loyalty to him because he felt that that would be unloyal to his other love, which was Christ. Until the end of his life, he discovered that he was Ramana, to put it in different ways. Because the principle of identity is not the principle of individuality. Koham, who are we, nor who am I. And Abhishikta was interested, and that was also his in the back of his mind, I think, one of his convictions, that he could not just live his life only for him, that his life was somewhat relevant for others. And that, I think, is what he has left us, that his life is relevant for others, but now he passed the buck to us. Now it's up to us. Otherwise, it's just superficiality. To be interested in Abhishiktananda, in Père Saux, only intellectually, as we were saying, is a betrayal of his message. It's a betrayal of his person. It's just not to understand him as he was. And the very admiration on the one hand, and at the same time distance on the other towards Ramana Maharshi, is again a symbol of his lifelong search. At the end, the two were together. Ramana Maharshi was Christ for him, and Christ was Ramana, which is not this principle of individuality in which we have converted. Christ is not an individual. Christ in the Eucharist is not the proteins of Christ. We don't eat the proteins of a fellow. It's a different thing. And if he helps us today, is to overcome this superficial faith, even if we call it Christianity, we just thanks God, not very attractive to intelligent people. Or I have some friends who said, thanks God I'm an atheist. I say, thanks God you are. Because the atheist that the theist denies is a phantom. Does not exist. Let me put it just inside which still exists in the liturgy which Père Saux was saying. At that time I had not discovered that God omnipotent is a wrong translation, not only misleading, it's a wrong translation. In the original Greek, it's not said God omnipotent. In the first Greek, it's got the Pantocrator, which does not mean omnipotence. Means that they are the highest authority among the humans. That is not the highest instance. You cannot go back or higher. That's the Pantocrator. That's the God of the Creed, not the omnipotence of the Romans, of the Latins. But that's incidentally. That I had not told him. My later discovery that omnipotence is a wrong translation. God is not omnipotent. Well, I was discovering that in different terms when we spoke about that on the Trinity. The Trinity is a relation. God is not a substance. The Trinity is not three substance, three gods. No. And in this relation, we are in. And in different ways, in more Hindu parlance, we're discussing with that. I remember once with Père Saux that this divinization, which is the core of Hinduism, is absolutely possible. I cannot become a monotheistic God, but I can become a Trinitarian God. Because in this relationship, we are there. And if we discover our own dignity, then we discover God. Why many people are so-called atheists? Because they don't believe in themselves. If you don't believe in yourself, how can you believe in your own dignity? I try to remember a couple of anecdotes, perhaps, with Abhishiktananda. But I have said a few things of his. He was shy. He was not sure of himself. Tâtonnement, he was saying. And I think his lack of certainty made him great and made him like one of us. He never spoke as a guru. He did not want to be a guru. He was not a guru bhai, as we say in India, just a brotherly guru. But it's up to us to learn from him. And he taught us only one thing. And I will put just in a nutshell, to be fully human. I had a friend of mine who died now. He was had been first a little sister of Jesus, and afterwards he liberated herself and was a very great friend of Abhishiktananda, Père Saux. And they used to, as good French people, made fun of each other. And she was happy with him, and he was happy with her. She could feel, no, she was not a Breton. She was from somewhere, I don't remember where she was from. But she was French. And they were teasing each other all the time, never speaking serious things. But always, if you could understand that behind and between the jokes were deep feeling, they had this French irony that Père Saux reacted very well. With me, I have regret only one thing. He respected me too much. Well, really, he felt that I have so many. Oh, see, I'm poor fellow, and until slowly, in the pilgrimages we made, in the excursions we made, Arunachala, South India, North India, we became really, and as a Frenchman of that time, toujours, de vous, you. In English, it's without each other after a while, and that was really liberating for him and also for me. That Père Saux, or not Père Saux, was just a brother, a friend. He was 10 years older than me. Yes, I think he's only 10. Enough to be my guru, my master, my friend, etc. But I could not hold him and not make to him any sign of respect. He would shun away. No. And his humility was not fictitious. He had a low esteem of himself. And that's why he could doubt. He was never sure of anything. He respected Monshanin, whom he called his guru. And Monshanin was just 12 years, I think, older than he. But Missionary was a theologian, the Missionary was a Lyonnais, which is a completely different thing from a Breton. Today, now we put the things in the same. A Frenchman, no. The French are very different from one another. A religion without mystic is an ideology. The soul of religion is real mystic. And I don't like to say mysticism, because I know the English pun, that mysticism begins with mist and ends with schism. That's the wrong mysticism. And Saux was a mystic. His experience of Christ brought him to transcend Christ. I remember that I told him that is in the Mahayana Buddhism, because I have also studied it somewhat. There is a text which says, and he was exhilarated, that this text, which is written in the canon, in the Mahayana canon of the Japanese version. Well, that's no matter. If you see the Buddha, kill him. The Buddha, which has been the greatest means for your realization, now will become the great obstacle. And I don't remember if I told that to Abhishiktananda, but my Christian translation, if you see Christ, eat him. That's the Eucharist, not the monstrance, not the superstition that the body of Christ is not the body of Christ. It's the presence of Christ, which is different, which is body and soul and everything together. But that's my theology, if you want. Indeed, the real witnesses are not those who write books or make sermons, are those who live it. And it belongs to us to make his life experience, I don't say palatable, workable. And he has broken this wall between Judeo-Christianity and a religion which has the guts, and I repeat the guts, to call itself Catholic. It has been in my life all the time. And I went, that is in brackets, well, what is Paul VI, who wanted to make me a bishop, and he liked me very much. And in one of these interviews, he asked me, "Cosa fa di bello? What are you doing?" And he did it very well. That I could not ask himself just straight away. I am asking myself, if in order to be a Catholic, one needs to be spiritually a Semite and intellectually a Greek, yes or no? And that's the message of Abhishiktananda, that one does not need to be spiritual Semite and intellectually Greek in order to be a member, a believer in that religions which has had the audacity to call itself Catholic. When 2/3 of the world today are no longer of the Jewish Christian, which is a great tradition. It's a great tradition, no doubt. And in that sense, Saux broke the wall, broke the barrier that you could be a real Catholic and not necessarily to belong to one particular tradition, which is very great, which is very is excellent, but is a religion on its own. And that's my interpretation, a collateral effect of that thing about Abhishiktananda, Saux, contributed existentially, is that one does not need to betray one's own tradition in order to be converted into another one. A collateral effect was if the Christians would not have this superiority attitude, this paternalizing attitude in front of a Jew. No, you are all right. You belong to us, but that we are your fulfillment. We had avoided the great wound of the Christian religions, which is anti-Semitism. It's irritating for a Jew to listen this paternalizing attitude that you are okay, but you're on the way. We are your elderly brother. No, it's another different thing. And that is this wall which the life of Père Saux helped to break. And you know that in India today, Père Saux is not much known, not yet. But among a handful of people, friends of mine, many of them, one begins to discover that real, I repeat, real Christianity is not anti-Hinduism. There are two different religions, each one of its own genius. That's why I'm not for the unity of religions. I'm for the harmony between religions. And Henri Saux contributed substantially, not by sermons, not by, his diary, which I edited, and he didn't want to publish it, and repetitions, and it was a long way. I had at that time the strength to be able to make a big book, because it's still a big, of his illegible script, which only Madame Bäumer, a Swiss lady, was able to decipher, and he had all the manuscripts, and she copied it, and from that copy we have made the selection of his writings, which are a document of this fidelity to its own tradition, dipping deep down into it, and not just remaining on the surface. To me, that's my personal opinion, the greatest epitome of present-day the West is superficiality. And Henri Saux was not a superficial man. You could not, even in his presence, you could feel it. No tricks here. You had to put off your masks. But that he did it without preaching, with example. And that was in his presence, in his hesitations. He was not sure about himself. He was all the time doubting. He, until the end of his life, he was not sure if he had done the right thing. But then you meet a person. You don't. You are not putting just a mask. You discover that in his doubts, in his hesitations, in his way of speaking, which was not Cartesian clear enough. Let it declare at his stand. No. He was a brouillon. Really, a mixed up, as many people would say today. I mean, a friend of him, who has written also something about him, at the beginning he was telling me, who died just less than a year ago. He had my age. What was his name?
Murray Rogers.
Huh?
Murray Rogers.
Murray Rogers. He was a confused mind. Later, he began to discover his greatness. But that's again another thing. If you meet a person whom you respect and you admire, you respect and you admire. If you meet a person who is a little like you, well, this thing look, then you follow him and has an influence on you. And that's the influence of Père le Saux. His weaknesses is his strength. He was all the time mixed up, as Mary Rogers said, mixed up. He had no clear-cut vision of a Cartesian mind. And that is what helps us, and what has helped the Church to enter into the third millennium. Even the Catholic Church could not ignore his sincerity and his authenticity. But, well, who is the Catholic Church? It's not the hierarchy. I make a distinction. Let's not speak. The hierarchy of the Catholic Church is respectful and is a hierarchy, but it's not the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church, I'm not saying anything new, it's the Vatican II who says it also, is the people of God. Is the conciliarity, is every believer belongs to that definition, self-definition of the Catholic Church, which the Vatican II translated into Latin, which is not very, does not say the thing that is the original Greek. Sacramentum Mundi. Henri le Saux belonged to that to mysterion to cosmo, that mystery of the world. That's the Catholic Church. According to its soul has own self-understanding. But that's no, his message is not that. But as the Gospel says, if the grain does not die, does not bring fruit. And Henri le Saux has died the death of a martyr. And that's my interpretation. His death in Uttarkashi, when he fell down, was the witnessing of his life. Henri le Saux lived, at the very end, his life. He was sincere till the last moment. He could not contemporized. He did not write much. He did not write theology in inverted commas, which is not theology. Which, well, let it be. He lived his theology. He lived his God. He lived his Christ. And he lived it. And that communicates. And that contagiates. And that's why I could not deny you asking so kindly of me to speak about Saux, because I cannot keep it quiet. He's alive. And he's alive through his sincerity, through his death, and through his doubts. He would never dare to put his own opinions, which he thought were not up to the mark. He respected me too much because he discovered, you are a theologian, let's put aside everything. And that's why we commented afterwards. The symbol to have taken a bath naked on the Ganges is a symbol of our real friendship. Touches me to speak about Saux. I corresponded with, I think his sister is still alive, or was alive. But we have not to be in a hurry to present his message. It will percolate, slowly enter, even into this church which is more Roman than Catholic. Sorry. Well, I respected the hierarchy, but which is making its own evolution. We need patience. And sometimes we want instant conversions, stars which no. It's good that he has disappeared into the earth and that he could see his own realization. That is true. When he had spent, we had planned. He wrote to me after from where he was in South India where he was living. He wanted to spend a whole month with me. I lived in the temple of Shiva. That was very good for him. And he could not come because he died before that. So it's very difficult for me to make an objective picture. For me, Abhishikta is not an object. Is a friend, is a mentor, is an example. Anecdotes about his life, probably many. I wrote a long letter once, a couple of years after his death. And I begin by saying, I wanted to write, because people ask me, could you write a biography of Père Saux? And then I said, well, I'm not a biographer, I don't know. But I asked him, he just bursted into anger almost, that he didn't want any biography. And that's why 2 years after his death, I wrote that letter to him saying, you didn't want that, but now I had to write about you. But it's up to us not to make of him just an anecdote, a passing figure, which is a very interesting one, but just a model, just spurning to us that we have to live that sincerity in which we may not follow him completely, but in which he has made this change in our lives. And that, I think, is the message. Unless you do not change your life, you cannot understand me, he will say. To understand him, and that's his existential message, one has to be ready not to take him as a rara avis, as a real example, as a star in the heaven who is just... No. You have to allow that his life, his death, his doubts, his stuttering penetrate into you.